You're going to really be very moved by the next speaker we have coming to the stage, Karla Solomon. She works as the lead advocate and outreach specialist for Mercy Gate Ministries. She's a member of the Human Trafficking Survivor Leadership Council for the Office of the Governor of Texas, and she consults for Homeland Security. Karla holds many titles, but one of those is Survivor. She has lived experience with child sex trafficking as well as adult exploitation. Karla's efforts today in the fight against human trafficking have reached thousands and have extended beyond our country. She stands for freedom. She stands for justice. Karla uses her story and her expertise to educate, to empower, and to be a voice for the voiceless. Please join me in welcoming our mainspring speaker, Karla Solomon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Karla Solomon. I'm 35 years old, married. We've been together for 16 years. My husband's right over there. And we have 3 children, one in college. But I'm here today to share my lived experiences of being trafficked as a child and as a married woman. So let me take you on a journey through the life of a survivor. At a very young age, I was taken from my mom by my grandparents. They found out that I had been molested at a very early age, and after this, one of my aunts had actually got legal guardianship of me. I lived with her from the time that I was 4 until I was 11. Life was great. I had structure that every child needs. I was very well cared for. But there was one thing missing, and that was love. There was absolutely no affection, and that was what I was wanting so desperately. So when I got older and I started asking my aunt questions like why my mom didn't care enough about me to even call me, the answers I received were nothing short of, she doesn't love you. She loves men and drugs more than she loves you. All I thought was, well, my aunt didn't really love me either. I always felt like a burden to her. Like she wouldn't have to provide and spend money on me because my mom would just get her stuff together. So I started acting out, and eventually I was actually abandoned once again, but this time by my aunt. She dropped me off at my mom's house with a backpack full of clothes. She told me she wanted me to see what it felt like to live poor. I was only 11. I went from having nice name brand clothes to having my mom's hand-me-downs. I went from eating 3 meals a day to wondering if I would eat it all. Inside the home, my mom and her new husband were doing drugs and being very violent with each other. I ended up running away for the first time at 11 years old. An older lady actually approached me within hours of leaving. She knew my mom. She lived down the street from us. She started to build a relationship with me to the point that I called her mom. She would wait for me at the bus stop after school, make me sandwiches, things like that. She then started introducing me to older boys and eventually drugs. And then I was raped at a party that she had taken me to. And then she became my trafficker. She sold me to her drug dealers or different men that would pay her, and she would use that money for her personal drug use. That was until she started making me use the same drug. And it was the same drug that I was actually running away from home from. I was 11 years old, and I was addicted to crack cocaine. I tried to tell the police every time that they picked me up as a runaway, but they didn't believe that my parents could be doing such a high-powered drug and still go to work every day, but they were functioning addicts. I was able to actually get away from this older woman after her daughter had intervened and shared with me the disturbing truth of how her mother had sold her since the time she was a very little girl. But I escaped her only to live on the streets and trade the use of my body for food and shelter. I wasn't allowed to go back to my mom's, so I stayed on the street. This went on from the time I was 11 until I was 14. 14, I came up pregnant. And I actually had to lie to an older man in order to have a safe place to stay. But it wasn't exactly a safe place. At the time, I didn't see the issue, but this was a 27-year-old man with a 14-year-old girl. Let's just say the sexual things that he forced me to do on a daily basis were beyond disturbing. He became very violent with me whenever he realized that my son was not his child. But I had nowhere else to go. So I endured this for 5 years. I actually found out later and had suspicions that he was abusing my son when I was at work, and I knew I had to leave. When my son was 4 years old, I actually met my husband in the ugly process of leaving the situation with the older man. He was my knight in shining armor. We got married after 5 years, had 2 more children together, and you would think that this would be the happily ever after. But I never dealt with any of the trauma from my childhood. I never knew the effects that it had on me over the years. I had lived with it so long and I thought it was just normal. In my marriage, I thought cheating and partying was just what people did. I thought that was normal because that's all I had ever seen. I was 29 years old, a general manager for a restaurant, going to college full time. I had a teenager, a toddler, and an infant in the house, and my husband worked out of town on the oil rigs. So feeling overwhelmed is probably an understatement. But I was being extremely selfish, like I had missed out on being a teenager or being a kid. But remember, in my head, being a teenager just meant to sleep around and party. So I ended up doing the one thing that I knew how to do very, very well, and that was run. I ran away from everybody, my children, my husband, and I isolated myself. I got into some very crazy situations. But during all of this chaos and separation from my family, I met someone who portrayed himself to be Mr. Prince Charming. He sold me a false dream. At first, he spent lots of money on me to pamper me, buy me things that I couldn't afford otherwise. But it wasn't just the material things. He listened to me. He wanted to really know me and everything about me. He was creating a relationship with me with the intent to use those vulnerable areas against me. And little did I know, he already knew exactly who I was. He actually went to school with my husband. One day, Prince Charming turned into a monster when he introduced me to his world, and he became my trafficker. He took me to a spot in Baton Rouge known for prostitution and drugs. He picked up a young girl, maybe 16, 17 years old, and instantly his whole demeanor changed when he got into the car. He was a totally different person. I was scared to help, but if we're just being honest here, because of my past experience, I was honestly just grateful that it was her and not me. After about a week of constantly driving them around and her selling her body for him, she got beat up really badly one night, and all I could do was watch. All of a sudden, everything changed, and from that night on, he never let me out of his sight. He placed an ad on Backpage.com. He named me Alexia, the Australian princess. He used a blurred out face picture of someone off of a porn site, and then he told me I needed to dye my hair blonde. Obviously, that's why it's red now. He even started calling me Alexia instead of my real name. I tried to leave, and he stopped me. He convinced me that I just needed to do it that one time. But after that first time, by the time I got back into the car, I was told that I had a $1,500 a day quota. And if I didn't meet that quota, there was punishment. And that punishment always included forced sodomy and physical abuse. He introduced me to methamphetamine, He traveled me across states. He broke my ribs in College Station because I shut a door. He even brought me here to Fort Worth, Denton, Crossroads, Arlington, and Dallas. He then took me to Colorado and stopped at every city in between that ran ads for Backpage. He refused to take me to the hospital for my ribs, and I could actually feel the broken bones inside my chest scratching my insides. I finally got the guts and ran when we went back to Houston, but I didn't get very far. I called my husband, and while I was telling him what was going on, I actually got a message of him telling me that if I didn't go back, he was going to take my 5-year-old daughter and do the same to her. He even sent me the location of where she was getting on and off the bus. I screenshot all these messages and I sent them to my husband. And then I called him and I told him goodbye. And that I was going back to protect our daughter. I didn't know, but my husband had called law enforcement. But when I went back, things got way worse. My quota went up to $2,500 a day. He added things that I was not allowed to refuse on the Backpage ad. He made me take every single call or message that came through. In a hotel in College Station, I was in a bathtub, and I weighed probably less than 100 pounds. I was in so much pain, I could actually feel every single bone in my body, hard and rigid against the porcelain. I was sitting in scalding hot water because no matter how hot the water was or how hard I scrubbed myself, I still felt dirty. I was actually fumbling through my purse, and he had obviously taken everything of value from me already, including my wedding ring. But I actually found this cross pendant that I will never take off. And it's got the Lord's Prayer etched into it. I looked up at the ceiling in that moment, and I shed a quiet tear, and I told God, I can't take this anymore. I was actually recovered by law enforcement 3 days later at the same hotel. They were screaming my name as I was walking down the hallway to leave, and it didn't even register in my head that they were hollering for me. It took an officer to get all the way in my face and ask me, "Are you Karla Solomon?" for me to realize that I wasn't Alexia. I remember telling the police that they had saved my life, and I still believe to this day that that is true. They took me to the hospital, and there was 2 ladies with Department of Public Safety that stayed with me through all of my exams and x-rays. They held my hand and never left my side. My healing journey afterwards was actually harder to me than just surviving what I had actually went through. I experienced trauma bond or Stockholm syndrome. And after I had a small time out from that disturbing experience, I actually went home and I hid in my house for 7 months. I wouldn't even walk outside. Words cannot describe the terror and the fear that I felt. He had actually bonded out and was on the run and facing charges for human trafficking. And guys, this is where an advocate actually steps into my life, the same services that Unbound offers. And I feel the need to tell you about my Che. Che is an amazing woman of God, and she was placed in my life by a connection from Victim Services. Since I refused to leave the house, my husband was the only one working. We had relocated to Kerrville, Texas, and we had nothing. We couldn't even afford school clothes or supplies for the kids to start school. Che, my friend, donated anonymously to us, and I had to tell whoever this person was, thank you. And that actually started the most amazing and meaningful friendship that I had ever had in my life. A friendship that I had always dreamed of having. Things got very, very ugly before they got better, though. I couldn't handle the memories that constantly tormented me. It was like a movie that would play over and over in my head. And I thought the only way out would be suicide. I took a whole bottle of my anxiety meds, and she actually called right after to check on me. I was actually waiting with the timer in my hand, trying to see how long it would take me to just fall asleep. I broke down in that moment and I told her everything. I told her my story. I told her everything I had been through. And I actually ended up laying face down in my carpet in my bedroom and crying because I was rededicating my life to God through prayer with her on the phone. I tell everyone that that was the day in October 2017 that I tried to throw in the towel, and God threw it back in my face and said, no, you've got work to do. The next day, I left the house for the first time. I got a job. She actually helped me in so many ways. She held me accountable. She checked on me all the time. She helped our family financially, sometimes when we needed it. But most importantly, she was there to walk with me through all of the hard stuff. She taught me how to love myself, and she led me to the cross where I found true freedom. She lives life with me, prays with me, laughs with me, and even cries with me. She wasn't just an advocate, she's became a lifelong friend that I know without a doubt even today I can count on. Now, I think every girl needs a Che in their life, but Unbound gives the same type of relationship to girls just like me, not just girls, but boys too. I've seen firsthand the passion that Unbound has to help individuals that are affected by this injustice. And most importantly, these guys truly understand what they're going through, how they're affected, and how to help. I had a situation just recently with a young survivor, and I was running out of options. I actually reached out to Unbound here, all the way from San Antonio area, and they were more than willing to help this person. Not just to provide this individual with a safe place and basic needs, but provide whatever care for whatever else that person needed. I believe safe places such as the drop-in center are so important. I think back to my many nights on the street where I had nowhere to go. I had a backpack full of dirty clothes. Unbound is a safe place and so much more to individuals just like me. And I pray through their efforts that they are able to help thousands like me become overcomers, thrivers, survivors, and leaders. So Mr. Prince Charming, whose real name is actually Herman Fox, was finally recovered in Kentucky and charged in Brazos County, Texas. He took a plea offer for 30 years for charges related to human trafficking. After my suicide attempt, I was working as a waitress, and then I started my own house cleaning business. I started sharing my testimony with small events, not anything as big as this, but I started using my lived experiences to educate people on what it really looks like from a survivor's perspective. Recently, I just stopped cleaning houses, and I now work full-time in this field. I'm a survivor advocate. I work as a council member for the governor's office. I work with Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign, with helping them create training videos and things. And guys, this is just a little bitty snippet of what I do. I stand before you as a survivor, and I work directly with survivors now. And I can tell you the majority start their journey with us saying that they were out there by their own choice for many different reasons, but they all eventually come to this realization that it was not their fault and that they were actually manipulated or forced into a situation where they felt that they had no other choice. And it directly resulted in somebody else profiting, which is the definition of trafficking. Many people are opening their services to those who experienced any sort of sexual trauma because we have learned that not all identify as trafficked. In those situations, they probably don't even know what trafficking is. I know I didn't. I do not believe that for 1 second that anyone is out there by choice. Most feel like that's all they are worth or all that they deserve, and that their trafficker has led them to believe that. Escaping is oftentimes impossible for many different reasons. My daughter was threatened by my pimp, so if that meant that I had to smile and tell a crowd of people like you that I was there by my own choice, then I did, because the punishment that was waiting for me or her was so much worse than shaming myself in that moment. Some misconceptions are that it doesn't happen here in this country, or trafficking looks like the movie Taken, or the myth that people believe it's not in my backyard. Let me be the one to tell you here, it's all under our noses, right here. It might look different in each area, whether that is familial trafficking, where it could look like a mom selling her child for drugs, or maybe the Romeo style, where there's an intimate relationship with the trafficker before the exploitation, and then that usually turns into the guerrilla style trafficking, where you can end up with broken bones for not complying with their wishes. Texas actually has the second highest number of human trafficking cases in America, but Texas is also the leading state in the fight against trafficking. Can't mess with Texas, right? You know, someone once told me something in the hospital, and I actually never forgot it. She told me, Karla, do you know that only 1% of people make it out of what you've been through? So I stand here proud to represent that 1%, to have a voice for those still enslaved, to stand against this injustice that affects so many. My tattoos are broken chains, and they signify me breaking free from slavery, but most importantly, Jesus is what broke those chains. My prayers today and all days are that communities rise up and help how they can. Others are set free. The demand is disrupted, and we can together abolish modern-day slavery by our efforts in this fight. Before I go, I want to leave you guys with my favorite quote, and it's by Harriet Tubman. She says, "I've freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed thousands more if they only knew they were slaves." Thank you.